because companies, we've spoken a little bit about this, companies can provide all the data in the world, but actually, if we take 100 different suppliers, we're just going to confuse the decision making rather than actually focus on what we need. So I think it's understanding what you need before you go into using the data. So if we focused on what we need and we've got the right products and tools, the decision making can be better using the data. But if we don't know that and we take everything, I think a coach for me or the players are going to come and say, yeah, but what's your actual message?
Education is a huge piece, as well as making that information, that data, like pertinent in their language as a coach. So I've worked under a number of coaches, and I've always been particular around specific data sets and how that information is interpreted. And I get really geeky around really understanding actually what the methodology is behind the collection and understand definitions, because I need to know that when I click on a clip, for instance, that has been powered by that piece of information, that data point, that I'm going to get what I expect.
My side, as most of you will recognize, I'm not native, I'm an Austrian, but I brought a very nice story for you where I learned proper English, and you judge at the end whether you considered it the right moderation in your mother tongue. Great to have you guys here, and I had a brief introduction call already with all of you, and I think you're gonna hear a lot of expertise here on this panel, and I'd like to bring this, to shine this in the most powerful way. So Arron is with the FIFA. That's of course an organization you're all supposed to know. Anyone not familiar with FIFA? No? Good. Then we have one national team, Norwegian. Also, I think they get supported by an important country where soccer was born, right? So Andrew is working with the Norwegian national team. I think we're also going to hear about some issues working between clubs and national teams. We're going to have the World Championship this year, so that's super exciting. And we have Marc, who had the longest way probably over. Anyone else from the US in? Okay, one more. So a few days ago in San Francisco, he watched a nice match on the weekend. Coming to UK, he always told me he always wants to see live matches, and he's very much into European soccer, and I'm allowed to speak just about soccer and football, sorry. Good, so to get started, year 1996, I bought my first mobile phone here in the UK. I was studying in Hatfield as an exchange semester, and this was my first mobile phone. I guess you all remember your first mobile phone, right? Anyone who does not remember his first mobile phone? So it was a very magic moment. And what I didn't know those days is that it will be very important for my career, because 2 years later I entered working with mobile operators. It was the company before T-Mobile in Austria. And that's a pretty rather brick stone, right? So where is actually the sparking point for you guys? Those days there was only voice and SMS. And then suddenly there was a data business. I was working with Hutch. Anyone who remembers this device? Yeah? First iPhone, this is already the third generation. And if you want to have it in your hand afterwards, they are pretty small. So if you compare it nowadays with a smartphone, like that one, it actually looks disgusting, right? But what happened is that this data solution kills Nokia. So it's a lot about disruption. And therefore, the panel is a lot about what change we're going to see. And there are winners and losers, as always in life. Let's get started to engage a little bit with you guys, because we want to know who is in the audience. When I was working with Google, I learned a very nice way to facilitate such a panel. So I want you just to play this game with me. When I'm calling now the profession, if it's the right profession, I'm going to start with coaching. Those of you who are coaching, they are supposed to stand up and keep standing, please. Right? And then I will call the next profession and the next profession. At the end, you are all supposed to be standing here in the audience, and feel free also to be part of that. And then we make the reversal. Only takes 2 minutes. Okay? Good. So who of you guys is in coaching? Can you please stand up? Any coaches here? Who's one? Players. Any players in here? Okay. Analysts. Any analysts are in the room? Any software vendors, hardware vendors, any solution providers in the room? Any journalists in the room? So what did I miss? Any investors in the room? So what profession are you representing that you're not standing yet?
I'm a creative.
You're creative. Okay. So please, all the creatives also getting up. What other profession are we missing? The dad of Patrick?
Yes.
You are the visionary. Okay, you tried. Okay. So can you please stand up now all? And I'm just making the reverse one. Those of you who are not working with data at all, so you're not working with data, you better sit down now. Only those who are not working with data. Good. Those of you who only work once a week with data, please sit down. Those of you who are working twice, 3 times a week with data, please sit down. And those of you who are working on a daily basis with data, please sit down. Good. Thank you very much for playing this short game with me. I think we just wanted to get an idea of who is in the room. I'd like to kick off my round of questions with a question about the data-driven decisions. So it's about performance data, it's about sports, football. On a scale from 1 to 10, when 1 is we literally didn't start yet working with data in soccer, and if 10 is something like, did we make any decision in real time on a super personalized individual level? 1 is really at the start and 10 is superb. I want you guys to come up with a number, and first give me the number, and once you all have given me a number, I want you all to explain with a few sentences why you have given me this rating. Make sense? Good.
In terms of where we are right now,
Yes.
I mean, I think we're in the middle of the journey. I'd say a 5.
Okay. 5?
Yeah, I'd go maybe between 5 and 6.
More optimistic?
Yeah, a little bit, maybe too optimistic. I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah, between 5 and 6, starting to get more into using it to confirm and deny, rather than just for that to make a decision. So yeah, somewhere between.
Okay. How is Wales doing on ratings?
In reality, probably today will be the first time in the FIFA Women's Champions Cup where we will have testing on 10.
Mm-hmm.
So where data will make a decision on a new product called Power Ranking, which will be a sponsored product for Aramco at the World Cup. The first testing of that today, so that'll be the first time I'd say we could say 10, because it's completely objective from data in its entirety.
So nothing anymore to invent in this industry.
It's low. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But yeah.
Okay, so that's what's supposed to be. What do you experience really in this season? Where do you think the clubs are, FIFA is? Are you speaking for FIFA or are you speaking for?
On all parts.
Okay.
I'm happy to speak on all parts. I would say, specifically with FIFA, we have a slightly different role versus an analyst at a club or a national federation, for example. But there are a lot of decision making that happens from selecting the format of a tournament right the way through to what happens on the grass, right, or how we manage the game or analyze the game. So there are an abundance of examples of that. But in most cases, I would say it's probably the same as you, 5 or 6, right? If you had to put a number to it, where it forms more and more a bigger part of the decision making, and doesn't necessarily make the whole decision, but it's a significant influence in terms of the way that you think about approaching the necessary subject. So, for example, moving from an under-17s competition being biannually to then being annually was so much around the analysis that we did and the exposure for players in being given the greatest opportunity to get the greatest level of competition to ultimately improve them. That's required as young as you possibly can. Hence why we made the decision to move that to an annual basis, for example. So, I would say that was a good example of a 5 or 6.
Sure. I may come back to that. Andrew.
So I guess ours is a little bit different in terms of we're your customers at FIFA, effectively. Because, for example, if I take the World Cup in the summer, a lot of how we can use data and how we can use information coming from FIFA depends, 1, on the quality, 2, on the product that we're given, and 3, how accessible it is. But I think ultimately how much we use it and the decisions that we can make for it, we need to know what type of decisions we need to make first. I come back to we need to know what we're going to use it for, because companies, we've spoken a little bit about this, companies can provide all the data in the world, but actually if we take 100 different suppliers, we're just going to confuse the decision making rather than actually focus on what we need. So I think it's understanding what you need before you go into using the data. So if we focused on what we need and we've got the right products and tools, the decision making can be better using the data. But if we don't know that and we take everything, I think a coach for me or the players are going to come and say, yeah, but what's your actual message? The better the data we get and the more we know what you want to do, I think then we can push from a 5 and a 6 to a 6 and a 7 and an 8 in terms of numbers, because we can focus on quality rather than just actually taking everything we can. And that's different forms. That's from physical data into technical data into tactical data, and being able to see things quicker and speeding up processes.
So the big next step should be to have more quality in the data.
Yeah, and consistent data.
Consistent.
Probably consistent actually in the first stages come before quality in a way, because then we can long-term measurables, and that's a very open bracket. So,
Marc?
I think from my perspective, we are at the stage where, like they said, we're collecting so much various data forms, right? Whether it's physical, tactical, performance data. But so now we have all the data, and I think there is a part of data overload, right? What do we do with that data once we have it? And so I think now that we're starting to get all these data points, it's how do clubs make that efficient? How do they make it actionable? How does it actually change what they're doing, right? I think that's what the 10 is. And so I think it's putting those systems in place. I think there's certain aspects that clubs have optimized. I think if you look at the world of football, obviously transfers play a huge part, right? We're at the end of the transfer window. You've got players moving for 50, 70 million pounds. So I think on the recruitment side, there's a lot of investment in that. But I think, I met with clubs the last 2 days, and it's clear that there's certain areas where they are spending a lot of time and money collecting the data, and they have all this data, but the data doesn't talk to itself, right? It's all siloed. And so the ability to make effective decisions off of what they're collecting is still lacking a little bit. And so that's kind of where I see us, somewhere 4 or 5. I kind of put it right in the middle because it's easy. So 5 was a neat place to put it. But I think we've gotten to the place where we're collecting a lot of data on what's happening, but can we help forecast with it? Can we help make effective decisions? And I think that's the void. And obviously with technology changing, I think that will change very quickly. But I think there's still some huge leaps to make there.
Yes, that's actually one of the biggest experiences I made when I was working with Google. This was year 11 till 15, where more and more data was deciding about how to spend budget. It's real-time programmatic advertising. And what we have learned is that there might be technical solutions and there might be one guy who fully understands the system, but it needs the entire organization to get data-driven. And that's always top-down. If the CEO, the managing director is not fully buying into data decisions, then it's not a data-driven organization. So I hear quite often that the analysts are doing a great job, but they have the feeling no one listens to them. The coach says, yeah, nice job. But my question to you guys is, because the company culture is always one of the most important things to make things happen in the innovation, in the transformation. So what's needed that a club is really thinking data-driven? Maybe starting with you, Andrew, because you're representing a real club here.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing for me is trust from the coach. I think if he trusts or she trusts your process in how you're making sure they get the right information. I think I'm lucky that I have a coach that he doesn't need to see the process for me to ultimately get to a game plan, a recommendation on something to do with the opponent. I ultimately need to see the game in his eyes before he's seen it, if that makes sense. So which is a bit strange. But in terms of using data, trust that I'm using the tools that I need is a huge thing. And sometimes you have to sell that in, you have to buy it, and sometimes I think it's total nonsense. And you have to be able to take a no and what is that? I've worked for a coach before that I've been out to train and put some things on his desk, come in and he's written shit on the top of it, pardon the language, on it, genuinely. So I went to see him after and said, what do you think? What are you doing? And he said, no, it wasn't all of it. It was just the top one, the top slide that I'd given him. And I said, okay, fine. He said, no, the rest was good. So you have to be tough a little bit in your mindset with it, I guess. So, but the point was that because then, if you're using the right source and be able to give the right information, you get more trust. So it's developing that buy-in. And I think that's the same with the players. I think in terms of using data live as an example, and using the correct sources of what we do and how we work. I give an example. It can be we've played the first half. I can have 50 clips at half time. Ultimately, we've got 15 minutes. The dressing room is often chaos, as many people know. The players are talking, discussing, sometimes arguing, sometimes fighting. The coach has maybe certain thoughts. We have communication lines for the bench. A lot of noise coming in. I can have 50 clips, but ultimately it might be 20 seconds where I can go, you can present one clip. So if you're taking 90 minutes and how many actions and decisions, you have to really focus down. And for me, then a player might come to me and say, Andy, our press is really bad. Can you, what should you do? What are you doing? So I have to go and speak to the coach, so then try and find an outcome from it. But the point to make from that is I've got to take 90 minutes to get a 12-second clip, or 45 minutes in that case. For me, that is data, because that's the selective process, that's the right information, knowing what you want to get out of it. And that goes from whether you work in football and that, or medicine, of how you're going to persuade the coach that a player should train, how it is in terms of what media you should release when you do a press release, what gets fans buying. You're taking thousands of pieces of information and you're the expert, but it's remembering your audience are not experts in a way. They have knowledge and they have views and they have personality with it, but they need to read what you're giving and push them into the area you want to get to through who your stakeholders are. That makes sense?
Yeah. So what I would take as a single word is create relevance, and once they see the relevance, then it's easier to get open doors, right?
Yeah, build trust is the biggest thing, and that can take time. It's how you do that quickly is probably the biggest question, because in many environments you don't get time.
I wonder how is FIFA doing on a data culture? What do you think?
It's a big data culture, right? It naturally has to be. We have a whole innovation department that spends all of their budget on, identifying solutions for VAR, all sorts of things, right? But just off your point there, I think education is a huge piece, as well as making that information, that data, pertinent in their language as a coach. So I've worked under a number of coaches, and I've always been particular around specific data sets and how that information is interpreted. And I get really geeky around really understanding actually what the methodology is behind the collection and understand definitions, because I need to know that when I click on a clip, for instance, that has been powered by that piece of information, that data point, that I'm going to get what I expect. Because there's nothing worse than being in a dressing room, there's nothing worse than being in a meeting and the manager asks, oh, can I see all of this moment or this player's moment? And you load them up and it's got the wrong player because the data source isn't great, those sorts of things. So extremely passionate about that, and knowing that can happen and being in a position where you can manage and control that. And then when it comes to certain metrics or things like that, or calculations that you come up with, it's then about making sure that calculation represents how they see it and what they have in their head. So understanding fundamentally again how that data is built, so you can build that out and provide that. So then I flip that back to then FIFA. We've got, for instance, at the World Cup, we'll have 48 coaches, all with different perspectives, all with different mindsets. So again, that comes back to the education. Our job as a group of FIFA is then to educate and work with people like this who will be at the tournament to ensure they understand. First, they trust it. So I can stand here right now and know, having gone through process after process, that it is the best data on the market. But I also understand his challenges of it's not freely available, competition to competition. So then I have to work really hard in a very small amount of time to educate him and make sure he has the confidence to build off the back of that his process. So I don't tuck him up in front of the coach.
So education and more empathy for the decision makers, what they actually need, which is also kind of relevant for him.
And if he doesn't do that, he gets me sacked.
Marc, what's your point of view here?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think the education part of it is time too, right? I think a lot of the data we're talking about, if you go back 10 years, 5 years wasn't being collected, right? And so if you, like you said, the decision maker, what does he care about, right? And the reality is in these worlds in football, right? It's high intensity and there's real consequences. You know, you lose a couple matches, you're sacked, right? That's the reality. So when that decision maker has to make a decision, if the data is new to him and it's not something he's used and he's really under pressure, is he going to trust that to make his decision? And so I think that's kind of where time will play its role with the education, but also with the adoption as you start to get decision makers who've been around data for longer. As the data has been around for longer, they start to build that trust and they start to understand not the fear of, am I going to make the wrong decision with the data, but actually the acknowledgement that I can't make this decision without the data. This is actually going to lead me to success because of those stakes. So I think, you know, what both of them said, the education, having a decision maker, knowing what data you want, but as time goes forward and we have more familiarity with the data and the data becomes more consistent, I think that adoption becomes easier. And I think the people who are making those decisions will have lived with data their whole life and have no other choice.
And bringing in here another example from sports, which they're using data a lot, which is cycling. If any one of you is watching Tour de France, they actually know exactly the minute or the kilometer by when they need to fuel, because they know exactly that in 20 minutes they need more energy. So that's sports which is really high end, and we're learning a lot from that. Becoming a little bit provocative, because what I learned at Google is if the technology is changing so fast, sometimes people cannot transform themselves fast enough. So will we see a new generation of coaches, definitely younger, because they tend to adopt technology easier than the old generation? What's your thoughts on that, Arron?
You want me to go first? Yeah.
If it's too political, let's start with Marc first.
No. I think naturally, there's plenty of other examples in sport, basketball, for instance, hockey. They're great examples where coaches over time have adopted data in so many wonderful ways. You know, you've got some coaches in the NBA sat behind a desk writing code in some examples, right? So I don't think in football it will ever quite get that far, or it may not be in my career lifetime necessarily. You may have, you know, some unique individuals that will do, because I think the difference being is that managing a squad of 23 is going to be so difficult to manage it end-to-end process of that through data. Naturally, like you said, younger coaches being exposed to more performance analysis being a fundamental part of their job and their education through coaching licenses and so on, they're naturally going to be exposed to it. So we'll trust it and we'll use it more. But I think ultimately there will always be this element of being in a stadium like this where you've got 20, 30, 40, 50,000 fans. It's always hard to rely on one piece of information, and you have to take that information in as a coach and all of those variables. So it'll play a part, but I don't think it'll ever be the...
So evolution, no revolution.
Yeah, probably.
Okay, thank you.
I think the interesting part is the players are seeing more and more, especially. So the coaches often are in coaching or as staff or medicine, whatever it is. natural for us to be enthusiastic because we've studied it. That's what we wanted to do effectively. But the players are seeing more and more. And the interesting ones for me is things like in La Liga, their main partnership was with Copilot. And you see some of the graphics that are there now, and that the players see that. So naturally, we work a lot in terms of visual because we expect that we want to make it engaging for the players. So we've tried to make, for example, opposition lineup slides or things like that in a way look like FIFA. So we'll take the background off the stadium, work with lighting a lot, so which probably works a little bit with the creative guys here. Then I guess it's going more into that world. It's how do you make it engaging for the players in terms of data? So the players, they don't need complex data, but they want to see things visually. It's how they see FIFA, how they see Football Manager, how they see it on Monday Night Football in England, how they see it on the Sunday programs in Italy or wherever it is. There's so much data and graphics available, and even that comes up on the screen. So in any tournament, any major tournament now, there's more and more. So I think where it will come, it's not that they want any more. I think the hunger's kind of always been there for them to learn more about themselves, and which kid doesn't want to watch themselves more on TV, right? But I think the point will be is they want it to look really good. So there's some clubs now that are taking graphic designers. We're not going to change the process going into the World Cup of how we work, because we've found the winning formula in a way where we don't have too many meetings. We try and cut it down, keep it so it's fresh for them. They have so many games each year. But what we have done is we've updated our visuals, because when we're away for 6 weeks, and that's 4 meals a day, which is around 250 meals probably over that time together, they can get bored of each other. They can get bored of us. So I'm probably not going to do any voiceovers or talking so much, I think, and try and keep silent, but they need something fresh, they need it fun, they need it to look good. And I think that's where we're going. I think that you see that's where the investment in the media a lot is come. It's with the visuals, right? The same with platforms on media, dashboards on sports science that we're sending out to clubs on player reports, those things. I think the hunger is there for it to be cool in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think when you can take a complex, right, data scope and put it in a visual that's very understandable for all your stakeholders, it just makes that adoption easier. But I think going back to your original question, right, I think if you look at the decision makers, the managers in football 30 years ago, were all former players, right? Everyone had a playing career and then they went into management. I think if you look in the league now, there's 4 or 5 coaches who are, in their 30s or low 40s who played at some low levels, but were never high level players, right? And they quickly went into coaching. And so they quickly started looking at, where is my edge here? I was never a top player, right? And I can't stand in the dressing room and say, hey, watch this clip of me 20 years ago in the World Cup. So what is the data that's going to give me that edge? And again, I think that's how we start to see that adoption a little bit quicker. And obviously, right, when you have those complex data points and you want to get it across to players, you want to keep them engaged. Okay, how do I visualize this in a way that they'll understand, in a way that looks cool, right? In a way that keeps them engaged, for sure. But I think at the essence of it, it goes back again. Those decision makers, what do they care about? And how do we get to their position, right? And so if they've grown their career thanks to that adoption, it makes it a lot easier for them when they reach that pinnacle to keep leaning on to what they know.
Good. Thank you, Ned. And just, also to highlight, data is not just what we see on the field and what we expect as a data from training, but we're going to see 2 panels afterwards, or hear 2 panels afterwards, where it's about recovery and about fueling, nutrition. So that's completely offside or not part of what we as an audience would see. We're working together with someone. She started consulting a top English Premier club, meanwhile also consulting a top Spanish club, a top cycling team in sleep consulting. If you're playing late, you'll have a lot of adrenaline. Will you fall asleep before 4 a.m. in the morning? I mean, if you do not fall asleep before 4 a.m., I mean, how could one expect you to be, recovered, that you can do anything meaningful the day after? And you play 2, maybe 3 matches a week. So how does this all end up? And that's another source of data to optimize sleep recovery. I hope we're going to hear something on this panel. And then the fueling, you can do a lot right or wrong, and it's all data driven. So it's a lot more than just what we see them playing, and from the athletic perspective. I brought one phrase with me, which I learned at Google those days. Data makes your suitcase heavy. So obviously data is not brilliant. Insights make you rich. So any anecdote where you made your coach rich already, or where you made the team winning by your analysis? Who wants to go first?
I'm happy to go here. I think speaking of, recovery and all that, I think that's really where you start to bring all that data together, right? And I think that's really what I touched on in the first place. I think we're at a 5 because we're collecting a lot of data, but how do we get those insights, right? How do you get rich off of the data instead of making it heavy? And I think that's the transition point we're seeing now. I think clubs are overloaded with the data, and to make efficient systems to be able to put them to use, again, probably a topic that's close to me because that's what our company does. But I've had conversations in the last 2 days with a number of Premier League and Championship clubs that are struggling with that specific issue, right? Okay, we're playing 3 games this week. We get back at this time. What do we do for training? Do we move training that day? And all those questions, right? I mean, I wear an Oura ring, not that my performance matters as much as theirs, but so that I'm aware, hey, your sleep, you've struggled a little bit, right? I flew over from the US. I've got a little sleep debt now, and when can I make that up? And so I think it's, how do we quickly get the insights out of the data? And I think the only real way to get there is for the different data streams to speak to each other, right? It can't be recovery in a silo and nutrition in a silo and physical performance in a silo. Those all feed off themselves, right? And what was your demand in that game? And then what was the following recovery? And when did you have that nutrition? Those all factor in. And then the subjective, right? How's the athlete feeling, right? I've spoken to some coaches who their decision is, hey, we got in late last night. When I wake up, I'm feeling tired, so I'm canceling practice, right? If I'm feeling tired, then certainly my athletes who played last night are tired. Again, that's the subjective data, but how do we marry that with the objective data that says, yeah, no, legitimately, your resting heart rate was 15% above normal last night because you got to sleep at a certain hour and that adrenaline kept you up. So I think that's where you drive towards that richness with the insights, is seeing that complete picture, and that's where you need the systems, right? And I'm sure Andrew, right, and Arron are both working on those things with the clubs. I mean, that's the service that we try to offer as well. But it's not simple, right? There's so many different data streams, and it's not always a direct correlation. There's no straight line there. There's so many different possibilities, and different people react differently to those circumstances as well. So I think it is a pretty complex topic.
So I didn't hear who you made rich. I assume you keep it as a secret, right?
I mean, all my customers. I'm trying to make my customers.
Good. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I think there's probably 2 parts to this. I can tell a story with it as well. For us, the insights bit is kind of removing the noise and what do they actually need. So I can link it back to the sleep, probably. It's a good example. I remember June 22, it was when UEFA in the Nations League had 4 games in the national team in 12 days. And our first 2 were Serbia away and Sweden away. Sweden is a high profile game, and it's a derby for us really. And Serbia away, we played in Belgrade, and it was a late game. I think we flew after the players wanted to get straight to Stockholm after the game. So we flew straight from Belgrade after the game. And we arrived in Stockholm 4 or 5 in the morning. And we had a game again in 2 days where we played Sweden, and then we had Slovenia home, Sweden home after it. When we got to the hotel in Sweden, one of the players actually wanted his clips from the night before, and he said to me, I won't go to sleep before I've watched them. And it's 5 in the morning, but he's got a game in 2 days. So recovery was the biggest thing. So my dilemma was, hang on a minute, if he goes to breakfast tomorrow, breakfast will be 1 o'clock, and he's not slept, and he goes to sports science and medical, that he hasn't slept. But then I've given him clips. They're going to say, why are you giving him clips at that time? And he's not sleeping. It's recovery. But at the same time, he's saying to me, I need those, otherwise I won't sleep anyway, and I have to review my performance. That's part of my process mentally, in terms of evaluation, so I can move on to the next game. The question is, what do you do? And they are the dilemmas, because how much of that is noise? If me giving him those clips is noise, and I actually want him to move on fast, what shall I do? And we had the same. We beat Italy at home 3-0, big emotional game this year just gone, at home. And then we were due to play Estonia away 2 days later in horrible weather. We did a post-match the day after, and the players were drained. It was a big night for them, physically, mentally. We got to Slough. We didn't play well. We were lucky. We won 1-0, and it was a very solid performance. But it wasn't us, and we learned from that. So actually, we then took that information on and decided for the for October, November, we're going to move on faster. After the first game, we'll wait with evaluation. We're moving on because we don't need another meeting. We need to. What do we need? Is that meeting noise and really the sat there going, or are they actually taking this on? Are they learning? And what they were learning compared to what they were resting, getting in their head, it wasn't right. So we changed how we're working, and it links back to that. It was about, it's not just me giving tactical detail. Can they take it on? Are they tired? What do they need? So we actually changed learning from what had happened previously. And that was part of a staff discussion. So we made medical aware of the problems we had, if they need clips, if they don't. And communication was the biggest part of it.
Excellent example. And what I learned also from the national teams is that because they are not always together, time is even more sensitive, right? I mean, you have them for a week, sometimes less. You didn't see them beforehand, you do not see them afterwards. So thanks for sharing that. Arron, who did you make rich?
Financially rich, no one, never. But one of the programs that we have is called this National Team Insights, because we're a big advocate, and a personal passion of mine as well is to try and always raise the floor, not the ceiling. The ceiling will always raise itself, right? Especially in football. So putting ourselves in a position where we have all of this abundance of information, try and engage with national teams that want to go be better, and how do we draw insight from that? So we will spend a couple of months as a partner with that national team to look at everything that they're doing, the way that they're playing, how they're playing, not so deep in terms of the more multidisciplinary approach that these guys have just talked about, but certainly when it comes to on the pitch and the coaching side, how do we then get actual valuable insight that's relevant to them? It would be easy for us to go and say, well, you rank this for this metric, this for this metric, this for this metric, and this is how you would potentially get better at that metric. But the reality is they may not have the pitches to be able to play that way, the players to play that way, the time in the grass to do those things. So understanding what their challenges are in order to be able to make those decisions, to then actually draw valuable insight and real insight for them. So for me, making them richer in that sense is probably the best example I can give. We did Italy women's last week. I have Senegal on Tuesday for the final kind of breakdowns and kind of webinars to help them ensure that they progress.
Great, I like the floor and ceiling reference here. Last question, because we're running then out of time, and I actually wanted to ask Andrew how they are doing with data coming from clubs to the national team and backward, but probably we have to take that into break if someone is interested. Working with data-driven companies, there's the term North Star. So where's your North Star? And that's supposed to be one metric. I know this is difficult. So what's your recommendation? What North Star are you using from all the data you're looking the most at? Arron, do you want to start?
Our North Star, in reality, is basically understanding why a team has won a World Cup. Because if we can understand how and why a team World Cup and what they did in the process of getting there on the pitch, then we can disseminate that information and share that information globally. So that's our challenge. Monitor and then understand why that team won the World Cup.
Cool. So you re-engineer the success.
Exactly.
Wow.
Ours is probably understanding what our best level looks like related to our identity and our playing style. If we can do that, then we're one in KPIs, but two, also we know where we're competitive and where we're not. And probably the other part to it is there's a lot in football, but probably the better we can be in both boxes, the more successful we'll be. Being totally simple. So they're probably the two main areas for us: is what we are and what do we need in both boxes. Okay, with that we'll have success. So,
good. Thanks for your North Star, Marc.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, right, it's the results. The results are what matter most, right? And I think there's a lot of noise in results, right? There's a lot of ambiguity. There's a lot of variance, but the results are the key. I think for us, we're trying to drive performance and really availability of players, right? Player availability. I think, especially with the amount of games they're playing now, how do you use the data to try to drive that availability and that peak performance? But ultimately, it just boils down to results, right? Everyone's looking for the results, and like I said, there's a lot of different factors in that, but that's what everyone's looking for.
So I mean, always all the respect for those people working in this field, and I think it's underappreciated what you guys are doing. The reason for using Wictory as a brand name is that we do not just want the athletes to show the victory that they have won, but we also want to bring in a second victory for the coaching and for the technology behind. And if you have two victories, you can make a W out of it. So that's why we are called Wictory. Thanks for listening. Thanks for you guys coming up, traveling here to London, to this lovely stadium. I don't know whether we have time for taking questions. I'm asking the organizers whether this is in the agenda. Patrick?
Yeah, we can do one or two if there are some. Yeah.
Okay. I always hear the maximum two, so we have two questions. Who is bold enough? I'm always taking females first. Is this okay?
Yeah, of course it is.
Good.
Well, thank you so much for all your insights. I think there was a topic that was touched on around, I guess, processing capability, really, with the volume of data that's being absorbed. I think one example was around how do I compress all that data into 20 seconds, right? From your perspectives, how do you feel that the roles in football are likely to change in the future? I.e., I think you've touched on the fact that, coaches in the past may have been players, but what sort of skill sets and what sort of capabilities do you see being necessary for roles that are critical, really, in the future for how football will perform?
Who do you want to answer it?
It's for the whole panel.
If you only can select one.
Oh, Andrew.
I was hoping you didn't say your name. No, it's okay. Probably the biggest one is to be adaptable. I think obviously one thing is the head coach who comes in and has the power, in all honesty, that they can decide the workflows. But I think for coaching in general, whether it's an assistant or a youth coach or a coach, using data, there's so much of it now. You have to be adaptable to move in different ways, and certain people want it presented in a certain way and others in a not. I think we probably haven't said this, maybe I should have said it before, is embracing it. They have to be able to embrace it, because I got told, actually, I was at a conference a while ago, and they said AI won't take your job, but a human that uses AI will take your job. So the biggest quality probably is being adaptable, but being able to embrace and use technology and data and AI in the future. If they don't, you'll get left behind, however it moves, I think.
And I think we all can agree that that's the most important key takeaway. AI will not replace you, but the guys who use more AI will replace these guys who do not use AI and data. So I think that's thanks for bringing up the embracing and looking for that. Second question.
Hi, I had a great conversation with those. Just that you're fine for a minute. I'm going to come to you, Arron. Mine is based on the game today. There could be criticism that the game is becoming more boring, and there are people that would say that the players are coached too much, that creativity's gone. And so I don't mean you in particular, but how much of that can we blame, in inverted commas, on data accessibility?
I'm not too sure you necessarily directly blame it on data. I think one of the fundamental reasons why that is because so much information on each other is available. Like, there's more football on TV, social media than there ever has been before, and people are consuming it at such a high rate. So, even 10 years ago, working in a club, it was challenging, and you'll probably find that now challenging to get footage on your opponent. You were borrowing and stealing it. Now it's far more easily accessible, right? And that goes right the way down through the program. Youth of the 17s, we split teams into overly structured, balanced, and unstructured. and because it was so clear to see, and the guys that were balanced went on to reach the last four of the tournament and went on to win it. The guys that were overly structured failed miserably, and the guys that were unstructured looked great, was exciting football, but ultimately had some key flaws in the way that they were playing, and they lost games. So I don't think we can necessarily blame data directly. I think we can look at it more holistically than that and just say the access to the volume of information on everybody makes it somewhat easier to copy, because that's another thing that we see, copycat mentality in the 17s again, because I've just come from it. The short goal kicks, the long throw-ins, nobody was doing it at the beginning of the tournament. We saw a couple of goals scored from it, then by the final, every throw-in was going long into the box, right? So it's just the influence that visually what we see has. I've got Arson as a boss who's up my ass constantly about how do we make the game more exciting, right? Because he's come from an era where he had great teams that dominated possession but created really good chances and really exciting goals. So shows highlight reels all the time with them. So I absolutely agree with you that is there, but at the same time, I'm not too sure what the full solution would be other than encouragement.
Thank you. Who will be in the US this year for the World Cup?
Probably all three of us, right?
Who of you guys are planning to be there?
If Wales get there.
If Wales gets there, okay. Crossing fingers for you guys. Not that many. It's hard to get tickets, right? And they're pretty expensive. Good. So we're also going to be there and really look forward. Ideally, we're going to meet over there and enjoy your day. Thank you.